What happens when the smallest voice on the street carries the loudest truth? It was supposed to be just another afternoon. The kind of day that blurs into the hum of engines and the burn of sun on metal, until a boy's trembling voice sliced through it all. "Buy my bike, sir. Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days." The words hung in the air like smoke that refused to fade. The bikers stopped mid-ride, engines rumbling beneath them, their leather vests glinting in the dying light. These were men hardened by the road, men who'd seen bar fights, betrayals, and blood. But this hit somewhere deeper. The boy couldn't have been older than 10. His shirt was ripped, his shoes didn't fit, and yet his eyes, they carried the kind of pain only life can teach too early. For a moment, nobody moved. Then their leader, a man they called Knox, killed his engine. The sudden silence felt like a heartbeat holding its breath. He didn't know why, but something about that kid's words clawed at him, like a memory he'd tried to bury years ago. He didn't know it yet, but that single plea was about to drag him into a story that would test every ounce of his strength, his loyalty, and his idea of justice. Because sometimes, the road doesn't lead to freedom. It leads straight to the truth. The city was unusually quiet that evening, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Streetlights flickered in uneven rhythms, casting long, jagged shadows across cracked sidewalks. The air smelled faintly of rain, though the sky remained stubbornly clear, tinged with the soft orange glow of a dying sun. Garbage rustled in the wind, tin cans rolling like forgotten secrets, and somewhere in the distance, a stray dog barked, its cry swallowed immediately by the emptiness of the streets. Every corner seemed to whisper its own story. Paint peeled from walls, graffiti bleeding in streaks of color, some messages long forgotten, others still sharp enough to sting. The buildings leaned toward each other, as if sharing conspiracies in silence. Shop windows reflected nothing but fractured light and the occasional flicker of a lone passerby. The hum of the city was muted, replaced by the subtle rhythm of dripping water and the distant screech of a train on iron tracks. The boy walked slowly down this narrow lane, his small frame hunched under a faded backpack, the rusted wheels of his bike clanking against uneven stones. Each step seemed measured, careful, cautious of the shadows that lingered a little too long, of the silence that felt heavier with every passing second. There was an invisible tension in the air, a fragile balance between calm and chaos, like a storm yet to arrive. The bikers trailed behind at a distance, engines quiet now, their presence both protective and threatening. They were strangers to this part of town, yet something unspoken guided them forward, a pull, a recognition of injustice waiting just around the corner. Street signs swayed gently in the wind, their metal squealing softly, a sound that could almost be mistaken for a warning. And then, from one cracked doorway, a faint light spilled into the street, warm but weak. It was the only sign of life in this desolate stretch. Beyond it, the boy's home waited, a small apartment that smelled of dust and hunger, where the world had forgotten a mother struggling to survive. The scene was calm, almost serene, yet underneath lay a tension so taut that even the air seemed to hum, warning that what was about to happen would break the quiet forever. The boy's name was Eli, though nobody had ever called him that in the streets. To most, he was just another small shadow navigating the cracks of the city. But even in his youth, there was a quiet resilience to him. He pushed his bike forward with careful, deliberate movements, his fingers gripping the worn handlebars like lifelines. His eyes, dark and wide, darted constantly, alert, wary, but never broken. Eli's voice trembled as he spoke to the bikers, but there was a steel beneath it, a silent insistence that made them pause and listen. Even in his fragility, he carried a gravity that drew attention. Leading the group of bikers was Knox, a man whose presence alone demanded recognition. Broad-shouldered and tall, he moved with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering control, both of himself and the chaos around him. Every gesture was measured, every glance sharp, as if his eyes had catalogued every potential threat on the street. Yet there was a subtle softness to Knox when he looked at Eli, a flicker of concern buried deep beneath layers of caution. His voice was low, gravelly, but calm, carrying authority without shouting. Trailing slightly behind Knox was Mara, a biker with a lean, agile build, and eyes that missed nothing. Her movements were fluid, almost feline, as she scanned the surroundings for danger. Unlike Nox, she spoke little. But when she did, her words had weight. There was an unspoken understanding between Mara and Nox, a partnership forged through years of shared roads, unspoken loyalty, and mutual respect. Her tone was steady, but sharp, and there was a hint of mischief hiding beneath the stoic exterior, as if she thrived in the tension that others tried to avoid. Completing the trio was Rafe, younger than the others, impulsive and quick to act. He had a wiry strength, honed from street fights and late-night chases through narrow alleys. While Nox exuded control and Mara precision, Rafe radiated energy, raw, untamed, sometimes reckless, but always loyal. He had a habit of scanning faces, reading small tells, and reacting instantly, making him both unpredictable and invaluable. As the group moved through the empty streets toward Eli's apartment, their differences became clear, yet so did their cohesion. Nox commanded, Mara analyzed, Rafe acted, a perfect balance of experience, skill, and instinct. Each of them responded to Eli's plea in their own way, revealing not just who they were, but how they moved through a world where strength and empathy were rarely allies. And then there was Eli's mother, Amora, frail in appearance, yet unwavering in spirit. She sat on the edge of a threadbare mattress, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes, though tired, glimmered with fierce love and quiet defiance. When she saw Eli enter with strangers in tow, her first instinct was worry, but there was also an understanding in her gaze. Sometimes help came in forms you didn't expect, and sometimes the strongest warriors were the ones you never anticipated. Eli led the bikers up the narrow staircase, each step groaning under the weight of both their bodies and the anticipation that hung in the air. The apartment door creaked open, and the warm, stale scent of dust and hunger drifted out to meet them. Amora, Eli's mother, was seated on a threadbare mattress, her shoulders hunched but her gaze steady. She looked up, startled, and her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the strangers behind her son. "Mom, these are the people I told you about," Eli whispered, his small hand brushing against hers. He didn't need to say more. His eyes carried the plea. Amora's voice was cautious but firm. "Strangers don't just come here for nothing. What do you want?" Nox stepped forward slowly, hands relaxed at his sides, his boots tapping softly against the cracked floor. We heard about your situation. We want to understand. Who's been taking from you?" Amora's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, she said nothing, only letting the silence stretch, thick and uncomfortable. Mara's gaze flicked to the peeling walls, reading every nuance of the tension in the room, while Rafe shifted slightly, impatience coiling in his stance. Finally, Amora's shoulders sagged as if releasing some invisible weight. "It's Carver, the landlord. He's been taking everything, rent, groceries, even my vouchers. 2 months ago, he locked my food rations, said if I wanted a place to sleep, I'd have to pay for it in ways I couldn't." Her voice trembled, but there was fire beneath the fear, a simmering rage she had barely contained. Eli's small hand gripped Nox's jacket. "He even took my bike. I was trying to help, Mom." Nox's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He didn't speak, but his eyes sharpened, scanning every corner of the apartment as if absorbing the injustice in the room. Mara's fingers brushed the edge of a broken table, restless. Rafe's fists clenched slightly, the silence between words almost unbearable. Amora leaned forward, voice softening but steady. "I've been scared, but he won't stop. And I have no one else." The room was quiet for a heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Then Nox exhaled slowly, his voice low and controlled, yet carrying weight that demanded attention. "Then we do what needs to be done." Mara nodded subtly, Rafe's eyes flashed with determination, and Eli's grip on Nox's jacket loosened, sensing the shift in energy, the calm before the storm. The tension in the room coiled tighter, as if every shadow, every flicker of light, was waiting for the moment it would explode. In that small, dim apartment, a pact was silently formed, not with words, but with shared understanding. The spark had been lit, the line had been crossed. Carver's reign, and the fear he had cultivated, was about to meet a force he never saw coming. The city streets seemed quieter than ever as Knox, Mara, Rafe, and Eli made their way toward Carver's mansion. Streetlights flickered above, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across cracked pavement. Each biker moved with precision, Knox at the front, Mara scanning every corner, Rafe close behind. But there was a tension in the air that neither the engines nor the night could mask. Every heartbeat felt amplified, every passing car a potential interruption to the justice they were about to deliver. Eli pedaled slowly beside them, the worn spokes of his bike clattering like a metronome counting down to confrontation. He was silent, but his eyes darted constantly, absorbing every flicker of light, every sound, every movement. He didn't need to speak. The gravity of the moment hung in his small frame. When the mansion finally came into view, it was a monument to arrogance. Its white walls gleamed under the dim streetlights, a sharp contrast to the crumbling streets that led to it. Security cameras blinked like watchful eyes, and a few lights inside cast an indifferent glow on the manicured lawn. This was Carver's world, polished, controlled, untouchable. And tonight, that illusion would fracture. Knox dismounted first, leather creaking softly, and studied the house with calm calculation. Mara's hands rested lightly on her hips, her eyes scanning windows and doors, noting vulnerabilities with clinical precision. Rafe's impatience was nearly audible in the clench of his jaw, the slight shifting of his weight, but he deferred to Knox, the leader's calm authority overriding his impulsive instincts. When Carver appeared at the front door, perfectly dressed, face painted with confidence and arrogance, the shift was immediate. He smiled condescendingly, hands tucked in his pockets. Well, what brings street kids and wannabe bikers to my doorstep? His voice carried ego like armor. Knox stepped forward, voice steady, deliberate. You've taken everything from someone who didn't deserve it. It ends tonight. Carver's laughter was sharp, but something flickered beneath it, a hint of uncertainty. He gestured dismissively. And what exactly can a few strangers do against me? Mara didn't speak. Instead, she leaned casually against the gate, every inch composed and unwavering, a subtle show of control. Rafe's posture shifted, a silent threat barely contained. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first move. The confrontation escalated slowly, deliberately. Knox didn't shout, didn't push. He let Carver's ego reveal itself, watching every twitch, every smirk, every flicker of doubt. Mara and Rafe mirrored his strategy, quiet dominance rather than brute force. The power dynamic shifted not through violence, but through measured presence. Carver, used to control, found himself responding, reacting, his authority questioned without a single punch thrown. Then came the moral strike. Knox produced a set of photos, documents, and receipts collected from the city's forgotten corners. Each piece of evidence laid bare Carver's systematic exploitation. Unpaid rents, stolen food vouchers, threats to tenants, falsified receipts. The smug smile faltered. Mara's calm narration of what they had found, every transaction, every lie, hit like a scalpel. For the first time, Carver's carefully constructed ego cracked. His confidence wavered, the mask of authority slipping. Knox's voice, calm but firm, demanded accountability. Integrity isn't optional, Carver. You took from those who had nothing, and now it's exposed. Rafe, quietly but deliberately, left a black envelope on the doorstep, groceries and money for Amora, a tangible reminder that justice could exist outside the law. The subtlety of their action, combined with the moral reckoning Knox imposed, forced Carver to reflect, to confront himself in a way that fear or anger alone never could. By the time the bikers left, engines rumbling softly into the night, the mansion stood silent and diminished. Carver had authority, yes, but Knox and his team had something he could never reclaim: moral high ground and the exposure of his corruption. The street had shifted, not through chaos, but through the deliberate, calm assertion of integrity and power. Eli rode alongside them, small hands gripping his bike, feeling strength he hadn't known he possessed. In the quiet aftermath, he understood the lesson that had taken the bikers years to learn. Control isn't about dominance. Power isn't about fear. True authority comes from standing firm, quietly, with purpose, and letting truth do the work that violence cannot. The night was still, but it hummed with a different energy now, one of reflection, justice, and the subtle, unyielding force of deliberate action. The mansion's lights flickered as Knox, Mara, and Rafe stepped back, giving Carver space he didn't deserve but now had no choice but to occupy. He had always believed control was rooted in fear, in threats, intimidation, and the meticulous shaping of every outcome. But tonight, he saw something he hadn't anticipated. Quiet, unwavering truth standing before him. Amora appeared at the threshold, her frailty hiding the strength Knox had glimpsed earlier. She didn't shout, didn't plead. She looked at Carver directly, her eyes steady, and said simply, "You can take my things, my home, my savings, but you cannot take my dignity. And now, everyone knows what you've done." Carver's face tightened. He opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, to assert dominance, but found the words lodged somewhere between disbelief and shame. The evidence Knox had laid bare earlier, the documents, the receipts, the photographs, combined with Amora's calm defiance, pierced the armor his ego had built over decades. For the first time, he understood that authority without integrity was hollow, and that fear could never command respect. Eli, small and vulnerable just hours ago, now stood beside his mother, shoulders squared, eyes glimmering with a newfound certainty. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone reinforced the lesson Carver could no longer deny. Even the smallest voice can shift the balance when courage and truth guide it. Knox placed a hand lightly on Eli's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the moment. Mara's gaze lingered on Carver, calculating, patient. Rafe exhaled slowly, letting tension dissolve into quiet observation. Power had shifted, not through chaos or violence, but through the deliberate assertion of truth, accountability, and integrity. Carver finally stepped back, his posture slack, the weight of realization pressing down. The mansion, once a symbol of dominance and intimidation, now felt diminished, stripped by calm defiance, moral clarity, and the subtle yet unyielding force of quiet strength. In that instant, Eli and his mother didn't just reclaim their home or possessions. They reclaimed their agency, their voice, and the certainty that even against towering odds, justice could arrive, not with a roar, but with measured, deliberate impact. The city had begun to wake again, but the streets where Eli and his mother lived now felt lighter, almost as if the air itself had shifted. The mansion on the hill remained, silent and diminished, a quiet monument to the lesson Carver had learned, that power without integrity is fragile, and fear is never absolute. Inside their small apartment, Amora moved carefully, arranging groceries on the worn kitchen counter while Eli unpacked the bag of essentials the bikers had left behind. Each item, simple and practical, felt like a small reclamation of dignity. There were no speeches, no celebrations, just quiet acknowledgement of survival and strength regained. The bikers had left hours earlier, but their presence lingered. Knox's calm authority, Mara's measured vigilance, and Rafe's restless energy had imprinted a sense of order and justice that couldn't be erased. The apartment, once weighed down by despair and hunger, now seemed to breathe with possibility. The small window over the kitchen sink reflected the rising sun, golden and steady, like a promise that the world could be righted through courage and persistence. News traveled slowly but inevitably. Carver's misconduct, once hidden behind polished doors and a carefully cultivated reputation, began to unravel. Complaints lodged by other tenants, combined with the evidence Knox had gathered, prompted inquiries. The courts became a stage not for spectacle, but for accountability. Carver's authority was scrutinized, questioned, and ultimately diminished, not through vengeance, but through exposure and lawful consequence. Eli sat beside his mother that evening, his hands clasped around his bike handlebars. "Mom," he said quietly, "we did it. We're okay now." Amora smiled, a soft but powerful curve of relief and pride. "Yes, Eli. And you'll remember this. Sometimes, the smallest actions, the quietest voices, can change everything." The street outside remained unchanged to an outsider, but to those who lived within it, it was different. Walls that once carried the weight of fear now resonated with resilience. Shadows that had once intimidated now served as reminders that even in darkness, light could emerge through courage, clarity, and deliberate action. In the quiet aftermath, the lesson lingered. Justice is not always loud. It does not always roar or strike in anger. Sometimes, it comes in subtle, decisive moments, in calm defiance, in the exposure of truth, in the reclamation of dignity. And as Eli and Amora settled into the evening, sharing a simple meal, there was no victory parade, no grand announcement. Only the quiet, unshakable knowledge that they had endured, and that even against towering odds, integrity and courage could triumph. The road outside would continue to hum with engines and life, but inside their small apartment, a different energy had taken root. A quiet, steadfast victory that no one could ever take away. In the quiet that followed, Eli and his mother didn't need applause or recognition. The victory wasn't measured in power or possessions, but in something far rarer, in the reclaiming of dignity, the assertion of truth, and the courage to stand when the world expected them to bend. Authority without integrity falters. Strength without compassion isolates. And sometimes, the smallest voices carry the heaviest weight, capable of shifting entire worlds when paired with unwavering resolve. Eli had learned it that night, Amora had lived it, and the bikers had reminded the city that justice doesn't always roar. It often whispers first, deliberate and relentless, until the truth can no longer be ignored. Because real power doesn't demand fear. It earns respect. Real courage doesn't seek revenge. It restores balance. And true justice isn't about domination. It's about ensuring that even in the darkest alleys, right can find its way home.